Hi everybody, Adrian Plus here.
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
And today is our 38th recording, and we're looking forward to Saturday, which will be our 40th, which will be fun.
But today is also VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, and it struck us how very odd it is that 75 years ago there were tables in every street, there were parties going on. I should think they were faintly frugal, I gather, sort of eggless sponges and saved up beer and sandwiches. But the point was everybody thronging into their streets, whereas last night, of course, there we were on our doorsteps clapping the NHS. What a change.
What's saved up beer?
Well, I don't know. I think they just had rations and would have saved it up a bit in that hope that one day they would be able to celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Well, we're enjoying your emails very much, so do keep sending them. We do love sharing them with you. And we had one that was, I don't know, it made us chuckle, didn't it, Adrian?
It did make us laugh, yes.
Was it from Australia?
It was from Australia, yeah. And it's odd, really. Sometimes you read the beginning of an email and you think, oh dear. This lady said that our recordings were putting her to sleep. So at first I thought, this isn't going too well, is it? But actually, she has always had trouble getting to sleep. And I'm pleased to say that our recordings, it may still be because we're incredibly tedious, but I think it is actually quite soothing for her, and it gets her to sleep.
Yeah,
and I think
she actually said she often falls asleep before the end.
That's right, yes. But I think it's wonderful. I mean, I really, really do. What a gift to her. We've given her the gift of getting to sleep. I mean, that's great.
She may have given us a gift as well, because she suggests we bin the jigsaw.
Yeah,
but
she did.
I don't know whether we'll take that. Extremely wise advice.
And in the middle of writing this email, the cat landed on her desk and skidded and hit the screen.
That's right.
And
She said the cat was very embarrassed, but not at all hurt.
Also, we had a jigsaw sent to us. Those of you who've been with us for a long time know we're trying to do the
something jigsaw by Monet. But this was a jigsaw from a friend of ours. It's only got 4 pieces, which haven't been cut out yet. And we're going to do that jigsaw at some point, see if we can manage it. He very rudely suggested we start with the straight edges, and that might make it easier.
Yes, that was satire. Thank you very much. Right.
Well, yesterday, as Adrian just said, was day 37, and we were remembering the fact that was significant for us in the sense that was the year that the Sacred Diary came out. But it was also the time when you very, very, very first were invited to speak to places, wasn't it?
What was so odd about it was the diary sold so much so quickly that people who were filling spaces in their year's speaking slots would contact me, and I had no idea what they were.
And this was very local, wasn't it?
It was quite local, yeah, but it was in fact a meeting of elderly people who, I can't remember what it was called, something like the Robert and Joan Club. I can't quite remember. But when I got there, there were, I don't know, 20 or so elderly people, and the man who introduced me obviously had not really grasped who I was or what was going on, because he introduced me as Mr., and I can only tell you this is true, Mr. E. Bass, right? Much loved local lay reader. Well, every single part of that introduction was simply not true. I wasn't, and I'm not a lay reader, and I may be much loved by 1 or 2 people, but certainly not at that time generally loved by lots of people.
And it wasn't helped, was it, by the fact that
then he went on
you
to
were
say,
standing in for somebody?
Oh yes, there was a man who was supposed to come and show slides of the local area,
Yes,
which
they'd
would have
all
loved.
been looking forward to.
So there was a bit of a grim feeling already. And then he introduced me as Mr. E. Bass, who is going to speak about the secret dairies. Okay, so that introduction for me, standing up in front of those people, was just the pits. So I gave them 25 minutes of my best material, and they glared at me throughout and were obviously longing for the moment when it was time for tea.
Yeah, there were a lot of confusions around that time, and one of them you created, didn't you, Adrian? Because we had no idea that this book was going to sell lots of copies. So it didn't really matter that Adrian's fictional Adrian Plass had a wife called Anne. It did cause a few problems later on. Quite a few people had no idea who I was, for starters, and thought I was sort of hanging on, and where was Anne? But there was one point where somebody came up very anxious and said, "Excuse me, I'm afraid I've just got to ask you something. Has Anne died?"
Yes.
Anne, just recently, you and Anne had an invitation.
Well, it wasn't that recently. Everything in our lives happened a long time ago, as everybody knows. No, it was an invitation for me to go to Australia with Anne.
That's right.
And I mean, if there'd been an Anne available and she'd been, the right sort of person, I might have taken her along. But no, it's funny how fiction and non-fiction get confused like that.
But that extraordinary afternoon with those, and I wish we stopped saying about people being elderly. They were probably our age. Yeah. But they seemed very elderly at the time. Yeah. And it wasn't all bad, was it? Because...
Well, it was a real free gift at the end, because part of my time there obviously involved stopping speaking, which was popular with everybody.
Including
and
you.
Then going, and my top lip was stuck to my teeth. It was terrible. I sat at a table with a lady, and the tea arrived, and I had a piece of cake, which was very nice. And I don't know how the subject arose, but it turned out that she, as a child, had known Studdock Kennedy. Now, Studdock Kennedy was a chaplain in the First World War. Very famous. He was a poet, not a great poet, but a passionate poet, and a great hero of mine. And she talked about how when she and her mother, father, I expect, were in his parish, she said to me, the Reverend Studdock Kennedy, he came every morning with a pint of milk and a loaf of bread during a time when we were very poor. And then he just left, said goodbye and left. And I remember one day, she said, my mother said, "Come and look out this window." So we go up to the window, and there's the vicar on his way somewhere, hurrying along in his suit. And she said, "Right, now, a bit later on, we'll watch him come back." So a couple of hours later, my mother said, "Hey, look, here he comes. Just look out of the window again." And there was Reverend Studdock Kennedy again, without his jacket. And she said, "Look, he's done it again. He's sold it, and he's given the money to someone." He was, in her words, a wonderful man, and I think he was too.
I was thinking when you were saying that, Adrian, I mean, we were talking about rowing, weren't we? It must have been a week or two ago, and what C.S. Lewis said about rowing, and that you just get on with it and learn how to row and don't worry about the direction you're going in. And during that period when he was a vicar, he was already somebody who cared immensely for the person next to him and was prepared to sacrifice things that were important to him.
Yeah, I don't think he could have believed what was going to happen, though. And you're right, it was the best possible training. When he went, I think he went to Belgium first in 1915, and he was quite gung-ho then, and talking about young men need to sign up and all that. And he arrives there are 300 men waiting for him to speak to them. They're all about to go off in the pouring rain with the guns firing, and the majority of them probably would be killed. And suddenly he realized that war was not what he had thought it was. But instead of backing out, he became one of the chaplains who went out into no man's land. He was decorated twice, once for rescuing someone, once for taking medicine. And he was a hero. My favourite story, I will tell quickly. One day, two squaddies found a bomb hole, a place where a bomb had fallen. And there was a sign made out of a pipe, and on it someone had scratched "Vicarage." And Studdock Kennedy was in there, and one of these squaddies said to his mate, "Oh, look, there's a vicarage." And Studdock Kennedy poked his head out and said, "And I'm the vicar."
Yes.
Wonderful. Where else do you need the vicarage but in no man's land, in a deserted spot like that? Wonderful. And they loved him. They'd have done anything for him.
It's interesting though, isn't it? I mean, we're celebrating the end of a war. We're thinking of Static Kennedy, but we're stuck indoors, and it's very difficult to quite think, where is our no man's land? Where is the boundary in which we really don't want to cross that boundary, but maybe we have to?
Well,
and they vary enormously.
They do. I would have no trouble looking back and remembering my no man's lands. Well, the one that comes immediately to mind was that I was asked to go to a boarding school near where we lived, where children with learning difficulties and behavioural problems were looked after, and they were
educated
residential there, and they were educated. And they had decided to have one person after another representing different faiths.
Well, that's RE, isn't it?
That's RE, yeah. So I was going to be the representative of Christianity throughout the universe, and I was as scared as you can get. I was terrified. I'm not joking. I thought, I just don't know what to do. But I thought, well, you know, once I get there and I get stood up, it'll probably be all right. It was not. I got there, I'm standing upright, and these kids are all kids with behavioural difficulties. Almost all of them had someone sitting with them to look after them, and I'm supposed to talk to them about Christianity. I was paralysed for a moment, but I do remember I then started saying to them, imagine you went into a place where everything you ever wanted is waiting for you. Everything. But there's one thing that you're not allowed to have. And that did grab them for a while, and I made some sort of progress with that. But after a bit, the behaviour overtook the talk. But that's certainly one of the times that I was going out of my comfort zone, no doubt.
Well, that's certainly triggered off a memory in me, and that's when I started at a very different sort of school, because when I left theatre school and I had made a decision that maybe the commercial theatre wasn't for me, I decided to get a job in what was then called an approved school. Now, these were girls who'd been shipped out of London because they'd got such huge problems. It was a locked up place, and why on earth they thought that I would be suitable, I have no idea. But I remember, do you remember coming with me to the interview? Yeah. And we were standing in this sitting room, listening through the door to the most appalling language.
Yes.
Absolutely vile, not just swearing, but the whole conversation.
It was very creative, wasn't it?
Vile, really creative.
They split words up to put swear words
in.
They
did, and I remember you saying, are you sure you wouldn't like to come away right now? But I did hang on, and I'm not saying I managed very well at all, because I didn't. But my goodness, it taught me lots of things. And one little thing it taught me, I had read a book, and at the time this book suggested that kids with behavioural problems, that what you should do is read to them. So every night I had maybe 20 of these really nightmare teenage girls. It was impossible getting them into bed. They were in 2 big dormitories. But I thought, well, I'm going to try it. And I read children's stories to them, and I learnt something then. I learnt that in everybody there is still a child. And I would watch them put their thumbs in their mouths and listen to these stories. The rest of the time I failed absolutely all the time.
I think, you really tried your very best.
Well, I did.
No, you did. You did a great job.
And I think it probably led eventually to us actually going into working with children, which was the first half of our adult lives.
Absolutely
really.
Right. One that we were thinking about earlier, talking of no man's land, is everybody has got someone who gets up their nose, unless you are perfect, which I congratulate you on that. And in one book, I invented a character called Minnie Stamp, who was my nemesis, the fateful creature who followed me. The problem with this is you're trying to be a Christian, trying to be nice and loving and all that. Anyway, this is a little extract from that book. Call from Minnie Stamp informing me she's coming on the weekend. She's a junior teacher who joined the church a few months ago. And I know you're not supposed to notice these things, but she has a bit of a problem with the letter R, especially to my fevered imagination when she says my name. Also, she reacts to anything I say as though I've come to her for counselling, which is very annoying. Last year, I asked if she had anything to contribute to the Harvest Festival entertainment I was happily organising. She tilted her head to one side, crinkled her eyes in a compassionate sort of way, and said,
"Oh, Adrian, is no one wanting to do your little supper thing?"
"What? No, yes, no, I mean, there isn't a problem, Minnie. It's actually quite a lot of people have signed up for it. It's not really a supper thing, and it's not that little. It's not actually my supper thing. All I'm doing is trying to..."
It gives you an excuse to go round and speak to people, doesn't it, Adrian?
What kind of demented pixies does the government allow her to teach, for goodness sake? Minnie, I do not need...
We all lovey-dove you, Adrian. God loves you through us. You do know that, don't you? There's no need to feel tiny and lost. You're what I call one of God's little sad elves, always working away really hard to make us notice you. Well, we do notice you, Adrian, and we lovey-dovey-dove you.
If she knew how close this little sad elf came to altering the shape of her face with the nearest blunt instrument, she would have been appalled. Anyway, after I'd said hello to Minnie on the phone on that particular evening, she said,
"You sound all grumble chops, Adrian. Would it make your grumble chops day go all merry and bright if I told you I was coming along to your churchy thing? Because I am."
Could hardly say, God, no. On the contrary, I wish we had a special anti-bursary fund for paying people like you to stay away. I actually said, oh, that's good. But I don't think we can have any trouble filling the places. So, if you're just
Mr. Adrian Plus Esquire, Minnie says you're to march straight off to the bathroom and look at yourself in the mirror and say, "I am a fairy light on God's Christmas tree, and everybody loves my twinkle." Promise you'll do that.
Well, I don't know.
Promise.
Oh, all right. Tonight, as I came out of the bathroom and got into bed, I asked my wife Anne a question. Anne, can I ask you something? Do you love my twinkle?
Yes, it's not your very best feature, my darling.
See, thought so. I don't know if you have someone who you find it very difficult or gets up your nose, to use a biblical expression, but maybe that's a part of
the no man's land.
No man's land you could have a go at. So I wish you luck with that.
Yes, and we'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.